In Tavshin Pei Daled this year, we are still in the middle of a wild war between us and Hamas. And if, for one who knows just a teeny bit of history, realizes the source and where this war came from. Everyone is very familiar and should be familiar with something known as the Oslo Accords. It happened in 1993 between three people, Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, and Bill Clinton. Everyone's familiar with the famous picture of the two of them shaking hands, and Bill Clinton standing behind, holding the both of them, with his oh so deep and intimate smile of satisfaction that he's able to make these beautiful pshara, this beautiful truce between the two. But I just want to speak out to you a little bit what lies behind it and how that has led to everything that we're so familiar with right now. First of all, the chidush, the big idea that happened over there at that time, was as a recognition of a Palestinian state, which did not exist obviously until then, and that is to create something known as the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, which did them the favor of giving over a good part of the West Bank, giving over to them, guess what, Gaza, what's known as Gaza, and another number of places that we're familiar with in the state, to give them independence. Giving them independence, now of course an independent state requires having a police force. So we will do them the beautiful favor of giving them a police force and creating something even better than they had in the previous. Instead of them having to deal with sticks and stones that may break our bones, we'll give them machine guns, grenades, everything that a good police force is required. And therefore, these tzaddikim will be able to fight and protect us from the crime of the Arabs who are criminals. Of course, Arafat will be the one in charge, the person who's a very good person and cares to make sure that everything stays right and with a tremendous amount of stature, and to make sure that everybody stays appropriate. And that was the deal that was happening. In exchange for that, of course, there will be peace amongst us forever. And Rabin himself, Yitzhak Rabin himself, gave some very impressive words at the completion of the deal, saying how we will have to put all our weapons down and there will be a time of protection and peace amongst us, and the two of us will be able to live side by side. Beautiful, very meaningful, almost puts tears in one's eyes. At this time there were massive amounts of protest, of course, from the right, not as bad as the left when they protest, but the right were giving tremendous amount of protest, not wanting to stop, trying to stop this whole thing. But with all the trouble, it was being pushed and pushed. Even after this deal happened, 1994, 1995, there was terrorist attack after terrorist attack, bus bombings, soldiers being kidnapped, murders. It was absolutely horrific for anyone who was here in Eretz Yisrael, and I was here at the time. For some of it, and especially after it in the later part of the 90s, it was something that was unprecedented in probably any other society. It was horrific what was going on here. Literally tens of people dying in a bus that was being blown up. Everybody who sat in a bus didn't know who the next person who was going to step onto the bus was. It was a place of absolute fear and intrepidation. But here we are. It was in the middle of all these accords, all these connections. Al Kopanim, that's what happened during this time. And because the terrorist attacks were going on, every time they would stop it, but then they would start it again. Every time they would restart it again. Why? Because President Clinton was on a mission. He was going to make this work. He was going to make the two countries live together in a very healthy way. And on that, in 1995, there was what's known as the Oslo number 2, which was refurbishing all the empty lies of the 1993 Oslo Accords in order that Arafat can come back. Even though at this stage everybody understood that you're dealing with a proper bloodthirsty animal, a person who was one of the richest people in the Middle East, because all of the money of the Palestinian Authority that was given was in his pocket. There was no question about it. Everybody knew about it. And of course, as usual, if I could just say with the Arab semantics in general, it's hard to believe that one word that came out of his mouth was ever the truth. A lie was obvious, but for something truth to come out of his mouth was not there. Every time they tried to sign a paper, he changed the terms 3 or 4 times. For those of you who are familiar with who Lavan Arami was, Arafat made him look like a joker. He was way ahead of him. But the show must go on, and it was pushed, and like I said, the president was very into getting it to do it, even though Rabin was being held at charge and people were screaming at him and yelling at him. Of course, his party was behind him, Kamuvan, the leftists as usual, who were willing to sell the country over to be able to do it, but it was being pushed and pushed and pushed. That's what happened during that time period until, of course, we're all familiar, in 1995, when Yitzchak Rabin was assassinated. In his place took over Peres, and then Netanyahu came for a couple of years, and then during all this time period, in the 1988, 1998, 1999, again, bus bombings left and right. They even cut Arafat saying many times the word jihad, the Palestinian state, that we will take the whole entire country. It was known, it was recorded, it was seen. People knew about it. But still, a person by the name of Ehud Barak, who was probably one of the worst prime ministers that's been around here, was closing a deal also, which was known as the Camp David Accords, which happened close to the year 2000, during the time that he reigned as prime minister over here. And over there, they gave into more of Arafat's indignations, more of the things that he was interested in. He was going to give over the whole Kotel, give back all the 67 lines, give back the whole old city. The West Bank is yours. They wanted to bring back over. They were on the verge of bringing back over all the Palestinians that ran over the borders, the refugees that were in Jordan. They were going to bring it back into Eretz Israel, because of course there's no room in Jordan. In Eretz Israel we have a lot of room over here to be able to house them. They were going to bring them all over, and here Clinton again was standing behind it all, pushing, let's do it, let's make peace. This is peace in our times. I'm the next Menachem Begin. I'm going to be the greatest of all people to be able to accomplish such a tremendous feat. That was what occurred, and Baruch Hashem, the one good thing that Arafat did is he wasn't interested. He wanted an all or nothing. He kept changing until Clinton himself said that Arafat ruined everything. I was on the verge of doing, he was furious at Yasser, Yamach Shemo V'Zichro, that ended up breaking up these accords that was happening, on the verge of a great deal. That is what happened during the time of Oslo. Why am I bringing all this? Besides the fact that I think it's kedai to know where all of the wars that we have right now, where do they have all the bombs, the weapons, and everything that they never had until the beginning of the 90s? It started from these accords. We handed over the machine guns, we handed off everything. But it's much more than this. I want to show you something. The reason why most of this happened was for one reason. Anyone who's a half an American who knows anything, Clinton was on a scandal. He lied in court. They wanted to impeach him. He was in a bad, he was going to be him and Nixon were going to be considered from the worst presidents that ever existed. He had to save face. He had to save his name, and in order to save himself, he was willing to sell all of Eretz Israel to the devil. He was willing to give it all up just to be able to save face for his own selfish, personal endeavors. That is how other leaders work. Unfortunately, that is what a Goyish leader is all about, unfortunately. If we move on to understand what the war that we're experiencing right now is, a second event that happened that caused such a thing was in 2005. I think some of us should be, and if you're not, you really should be familiar with the Gush Katif. What happened with Gush Katif? Ariel Sharon, who was a strong righty, he was always on the Likud, he was always a very strong right person, pulled out with soldiers, broke down all the houses in Gush Katif. It was the only area that was still considered in Gaza, and that's the place where Kebiyachol we had soldiers, and we were able to keep in check Gaza underneath our own auspices, and we were able to keep things that it would be safe over there. Also, Ariel Sharon ended up pulling out all of Gush Katif. He did something unprecedented from any other prime minister to go to such an extreme. I personally learned that a Chavruta who was in Gush Katif, who said it was the most horrific time in their life. They fought back, they tried their best, and here they are, still nomads. They never really found any housing after that. They destroyed their houses with a lot of empty promises and never got it. Why did that happen? Also, if you look over there, Ariel Sharon was by the leftists also, who were very interested in his escapade, accusing him of many, many scandals, lies, and bribes that, as all politicians, he did himself. Something known as the Greek island scandal and a couple others that he was on check for. They were there and they were out to get him, to make sure that they could push him to do his own biddings, and he ended up getting acquitted. For this reason, he was able to do what they asked, and he kind of was willing to sell over Gush Katif for this reason. Yes, they'll give you other trappings on the side, but the real reasoning behind it was his own personal agendas. I think we should be familiar with these ideas, and if you want a recent one, I don't have to look far. We know with Biden in the beginning of this war, he was way behind us. He was completely interested in shipping over as many planes and weapons and helping us out as much as he could until he realized that he was on the line, until he realized that his presidency was in peril, and now he just gave it up. But until he realized that he was in big trouble, and lo and behold, he turned face, he retracted all the weapons, he wasn't interested in helping us out. Don't go into Rafiach, don't go into places which we knew were very fundamental areas, and saying, please have Rahmanut and all the have mercy on all the poor Azatim that were involved in the killings themselves. But and I don't have anything to say about Biden, whether he's good or bad. That's not my opinion. It doesn't make a difference anymore anyways. He's out of the race. But the idea was one. When it comes to leaders like this, their focus is only on one thing. Me, myself, and I. What's going to save face for me? Whether it's my covered, whether it's my money, whether it's for my candidacy in the future that I should be able to continue. That is the focus of what a leader is all about. Don't ever focus on what they say, focus on what they do, and look at the reality. Why is this connected to our Parsha? Oh, it's so connected. Because if you look in the Psukim, in the end of Parshas Pinchas and Chav Zayin, over here it says, Moshe Rabbeinu, Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, it's time to give up your kahuna. It's time to give up being the president, being in charge. And Hashem tells him, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yifkod Hashem Elokei Ruchot Lekol Basar Ish Al Eidah. He begged him, Hashem, can you please find someone that will take over the nation in a very appropriate way? Says Rashi, it's coming to say the praise of our tzaddikim. Because when our leaders leave the world, menichim tzarcham, they don't care about themselves. Here he is leaving the world. Moshe Rabbeinu, the biggest Talmud Chacham that ever existed, he wanted to learn his Torah, he was busy with himself. No. Oskim b'tzarchei tzibur, all he cared about was tzarchei tzibur. What's going to be with the nation? Who's going to be able to take over for him? I need someone to be able to take over. Is it my children who are supposed to take over? Is it Yeshua? Who's the one who's going to take over? And on purpose, he pointed out he wanted a person who's Yivkod Hashem al kol ruchos. Who's that? So Elokei Ruchot, what is that? Lama Ne'amar. Riboyna Shaloylam Yikad Kodesh Baruch Hu. Galu v'yadu lefanecha daita shakol echad echad. You know everybody in here, in the 3 million people, 600,000 people that are around here. Pick the guy that knows how to deal with an individual, not with a group, with each individual. Who cares about him as an individual? Who cares about each person for who he is? She has sovel kol echad echad lefidaita. We're talking about the biggest of all people. Moshe Rabbeinu, and he was sovel, he carried on his shoulders each an individual. He cared about them, and not as a group, but as an individual. Each and every person he cared about. And the Mefarshim Abedai Schwab says an incredible diak. Because when he said these words of taking over, what does it say? In order v'lo tiyeh adat Hashem kitzon asher ein lahem ro'eh. Doesn't say it should be a flock without a shepherd. A flock without a shepherd, asher ein ro'eh, or you've got Hashem ro'eh aleim. Put a shepherd on top of them. He says it shouldn't be a tzon, shouldn't be a flock. Asher en lehem ro'eh. What does it mean en lehem ro'eh? That they themselves don't have a ro'eh. Says Rav Shab, sometimes you have a ro'eh, you have a shepherd, but it's not lehem. It's not for them. I want someone for them, not for himself. Rav Shab says this beautiful, unbelievable. He says that's the word lehem ro'eh. As the Sefer Kilat Yitzchak. Kilat Yitzchak, he points out, what is Kilat Yitzchak? What does he point out? He says sometimes a person's a shepherd because it's a job over other people's sheep. But sometimes you're a shepherd because pasha your own sheep. That's your parnasa. Like Yaakov Avinu eventually took his own sheep. In the beginning he took 11 sheep, but afterwards it was his own sheep. What's the difference? If you're there for the job, so you do status quo, you do what you need to do, you work at the minimum, you make sure that they stay safe, keep out the lions, make sure that you get your paycheck at the end of the month, and that's it. You're doing what you have to do. But he said, I want them to be a tzoen, a ro'er, that he should be a type of shepherd that's only there for Isha Sher Ruchov V'Samachti Judo Alav, a person who knows each individual. It's his own sheep. Each person is his own son. He sees each one like his own child, and therefore he'll be able to do it. And that's why Kadosh Baruch Hu said, you know what? It's not going to be your children. It's going to end up being Yeshua. You know why Yeshua? Because he's a person that's Isha Sher Ruach Elokim Bo. He's a tremendous Talmud Chacham, and B, as we all know, who is Yeshua? He was the one that was Mesader all the Saf Salim. Before Moshe Rabbeinu came to give Shir He was mevaz himself. He put himself down. He set up all the benches, the chairs, the shtenderim. He put out all the books and the papers to make sure everybody's ready for the shir. He set himself up. Why? To make sure it's comfortable for the shir. He was worried about the individuals. He was worried about each and every person. He wasn't focused on himself. What are you talking? Yoshua, you're one of the greatest men. You're going to be the future Manik B'Klal. You're the takeover of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was a big Navi. And here he is setting up benches. What's with you? But the answer is because when a person is busy thinking about the kahal, thinking about the individuals, thinking about everybody else that he cares about, so then that's our leaders. Those are our leaders. Those are our Gedolei Ador. How many times did they ask Rabbi Yosef to take over, to be in charge, and he begged them, no, please, I didn't want to. Shlomo Zalman was the greatest of all Gedolim. He never one time stood in the Moatzah. He wasn't interested in going for his own personal interests. They were always focused on themselves, not because they were playing some fake anava, some type of property of trying to be a humble person. This is because it wasn't for them. They were interested in trying to only help the Eidah as individuals, not to be able to go ahead and just for their own personal covet. I'll take care of them as individuals. Shlomo Zalman cared about each individual. If you see the stories about Rav Yosef, I'll tell you a story about Rav Vajja. We'll end with that. You know, Rav Vajja did everything. He used to give on Shabbat itself 7 shiurim in 7 different places. He used to travel and break his legs from one place to the next in order to be able to give his shiurim. Now, I don't know if people realize, of course, we all say about Gedolim, they were masmidim, but I'm telling you, they say he was from the number one. He didn't put rest to his eyes. He barely had time for his family. He barely had time for anything. He was, okay, I understand all our Gedolim were to a certain extent that. But I've spoken to people that they say he was from the top of the masmidim, that really, literally never took a breath for himself. But he never stopped going and giving his shiurim to go around. He was mekar of how many people. He would even go to give a shir even for a handful of people. Didn't make a difference to him. He did what was necessary to be done. One time, he was getting a little bit older and he said, Matayes alabesi, I have to keep writing my svarim. I want to go ahead and learn. He had such an affinity for his learning. I have to stop. He said, I can't be doing so much. It's too much. I have to give it over to someone else. I can't do it. To be able to run and be able to do from run to place to place. He went to sleep that night, and you'll never believe it, came to him in a dream, the Chvodo B'Atzmo, Rav Yosef Chaim from Baghdad, the Ben Ish Chai came to him in a dream. And he said to him, the Ben Ish Chai said to him, he had in front of him, Isai had a sefer in front of him, the Rav Vajja came and approached the Ben Ish Chai, and when he approached him and he got closer, he saw that he had a Yeviyah Oimer in front of him, the Rav Vajja sefer, and he was reading it. And Ben Ish Chai said, wow, this is a great sefer, unbelievable, very impressive. I'm very impressed. He said, I want to write more of these svarim, but I don't have time, Rabbi. What am I supposed to do? It's time for me to go and do something else. So the Ben Ish Chai looked at him and says, al tanuch yadecha. You have to do this and this. There's no bigger schut than going ahead and being Mekar of the Tzibur. No, just as much as our schut in being able to learn Torah, but you have to be Mekar of the Tzibur. That's the biggest schut. That's the reason why we're here. Our whole tachlit is to be here. And he woke up, v'hinei chalom. This is written in the Hagdama to a sefer on Hilchot Nida, in Tarat Habayit. He writes this in Chelik Bet. A real story. Just so you know, Rav Vajja was not a chalom man. He wasn't one who used to speak out moiftim. That wasn't his story, as we're all familiar with. And he says a real true story that he appeared to him. And from there he gave him chizuk to be able to continue and be mechazik all of Klal Yisrael. As we know he did. He changed. He made all of Sephardi jewelry here is all here. Mamish, probably because of a single-handed person who made it. And it's all because of this idea. As Rav Chaim Volozhin writes, his son writes, and with this I'll finish my last words. Rav Chaim, he said, what should I do, Rabbi? He was telling his father, Rav Itzel Volozhin, asked Rav Chaim Volozhin, what should I do when Rav Chaim was on his way passing away? He said, what should I do in terms of the yeshiva or this? He said, the Ikar Ikrim, and this is my Masorah from the Vilna Gaon, the Ikar Ikrim is to be Mesada for Klal Yisrael. You have to do things for Klal Yisrael. You have to help them and think of them as each individual. What can I do for each person that you save is another neshama, it's another Olam Maleh, Ashreinu Matov Chalkeinu. These are our heroes, Rabbi Isai. When you read this Parsha, Parshas Pinchas, realize these are our heroes. They have a Masorah, we have a Smicha for Moshe Rabbeinu, to care about the Kahal. Their whole lives was only for the individuals, was there, and they never, ever thought about themselves. And I say this be'edut mamash, as much as I could. When you go and you contrast it with these presidents, with these leaders, with these stars, with these actors, with these musicians, it makes me nauseous to the stomach, it makes me sick the more I think about it. They're just all about themselves. And we see they're willing to sell a whole country just for their own personal covet. Take the lesson, let's do something about it, and appreciate the greats that we have amongst us. Shabbat Shalom.